For the first time in a long time, the New York Islanders have a surplus of NHL-caliber players at both forward and defenseman. We'll talk about the impact that'll have on the team and the battle for some of the final roster spots. All that and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today and talk a little Islanders hockey. And we have got a lot to discuss. The Islanders finally, with more NHL caliber players than roster spots. We're going to talk about some key battles for some of those final roster spots. Plus, a former Islanders highly regarded prospect is talking about coming back to North America. We're going to talk about that as well. We start with the forward surplus and a player who has been very polarizing for a lot of Islander fans. I'm talking about Pierre Engvall. And I guess the big question is, where does Pierre Engvall fit into this New York Islanders lineup? Is there room for him this year on this team? And you kind of look at the way the forward lines are being projected. And it just seems like Engvall may very well be one of those players battling for a spot on the fourth line. You've got on the left wing, Jonathan Drouin, Anders Lee, Anthony Duclair, the newly acquired Emil Heineman, and Engvall. Engvall probably looks like the 5th player on the depth chart. Now, certain guys can move to the other side, so, you can move some guys around, but realistically, the Islanders have too many centers. They have surplus players on both wings right now. So that, assuming that Maxim Shabanov makes the team, Mark Gatkin, Pierre Engvall, Kyle McLean, those are 3 forwards battling for either a spot on the fourth line or more likely to be one of the 2 extra forwards. And here's the thing that you sort of have to figure out. Obviously, you don't know what's going to be with Cal Ritchie, whether or not he makes the team out of training camp or not. If he does make the team, do you end up moving one of the centers to wing, whether that's Casey Cizikas, whether that's moving Mathew Barzal back? Maybe you can move J.G. Pageau. But again, that takes up a spot on the wing and makes it even harder for Pierre Engvall. And here's the thing about Engvall, and it's a frustrating thing, I think, for a lot of fans. When he's on his game, and we've seen it in spurts, Pierre Engvall gives you size, and I don't mean physicality, but I mean he has a long reach. He's a big player. He gives you speed, and he can put the puck in the net. Last year, though, he didn't play the game consistently the way Patrick Waugh wanted him to play. So he ended up playing in 62 games, 8 goals, 15 points. He was a -7. In 62 games, he had, a grand total of 47 hits. So that's less than 1 hit per game. And, when he played the way Wah wanted him to play, staying not on the perimeter, but going to the net, being more aggressive, being more assertive, going to the dirty areas. When he did that, he was a useful player for the New York Islanders. Again, realistically, a bottom 6 player. Although when he first came up to the Islanders, he did start on that second line and did pretty well there with Brock Nelson. But again, I don't think that's his game, and his lack of physicality and the fact that he does tend to revert back to playing more of a perimeter game makes him a less likely candidate to be on that fourth line, because usually you want your fourth line to add aggressive forechecking, better play along the boards, a little more physicality. And Engvall, that's just not his game. So what do? It was an interesting situation last year, and everydayers will remember. It seemed like Lou Lamoriello wanted Pierre Engvall on the team. Patrick Waugh kind of did not have as much of a use for Engvall. He ended up starting the season on the, went through waivers, started the season at Bridgeport, and ended up being recalled when injuries hit. Now, here's the deal. If he doesn't make the team out of training camp and the Islanders place him on waivers, he still has 5 years left on his contract. That makes it unlikely that a team will claim him. But from a cap standpoint, he has a $3 million AAV. You could save $1.15 million of it by sending him to the minors if he clears waivers. If somebody claims him on waivers, the whole $3 million comes off the books. But you would be wasting or using up $1.85 million in cap space if you send Engvall to Bridgeport. And, to me, the key for Engvall is to be consistent. We have seen him play an effective game for 10, 15 games at a time at most. I think about when he first came to the Islanders, the first playoff year he had, and maybe the first 10 or 15 games of his first full season on Long Island, where I think he was, pretty effective, all things considered, but that didn't last. And if he doesn't play the game the way his coach wants him to play, he doesn't have a purpose. And if I'm Matthew Darche, first of all, I think Darche will be more on the same page with Waugh than Lou Lamoriello was. And I think that will benefit the Islanders in a lot of ways. I think if Waugh says, I want this guy, in the minors, I want this guy on the roster, Darche is going to not 100% agree, but work to accommodate him as often as possible, that they'll be more on the same page. But to have a guy like Engvall making $3 million a year sit in the press box and take up $3 million in cap space when he's not going to be an everyday player doesn't make sense. Mark Gatcomb by comparison, or Kyle McLean by comparison, 2 other players who are going to fight for spots in the lineup, fight for spots on the roster. Those guys are making, $900,000 a year, give or take. It makes a lot more sense to have either Gatcomb and or to have McLean as your extra forwards than it does to have Engvall be your extra forward. Now, Engvall can give you perhaps a little more offense than either of the other two, if he plays the game the right way. But it just doesn't seem like there is a defined roster spot for Engvall. And that reflects on the increased depth on this roster. Would I be surprised if injuries hit and Engvall would be the first guy called up? No, I would not. And I wouldn't be surprised if he could put together, he finished the season with a couple of good spurts of 5 or 6 games over the, let's say, the last 15 or 20, where he, for 4 or 5 games at a time, he played the way Patrick Waugh wanted to play. And then again, he regressed. Patrick Waugh either benched him or called him out. He played well again, then he regressed. He's got to be consistent, and he's got to play the right way to stay in the NHL and to earn a spot with the Islanders. Would I be shocked if the Islanders moved him at some point this year? No, I would not. Would I be shocked if he starts the season in Bridgeport again? No, I would not. But look, this is just, unfortunately, one of those bad contracts, those hard-to-move contracts that Lou Lamoriello left this team with. I would love to see Pierre Engvall play well, play up to expectations, and be consistent. He has to prove to Matthew Darche and to Patrick Waugh that he's going to do that. If he does, he might just stay on the roster. If not, it's a $3 million hole. Even if you are only paying $1.85 million a year to have him sit in Bridgeport, it's not a good use of money. Let's see whether or not Engvall finds a spot on this team. We have got a lot more to get to. There's also a battle for a spot on the third defense pair. We'll talk about that. We'll have an update on Ruslan Ishkakov and what that means for the Islanders. All that and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need to hire like yesterday. The pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly where Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. We talked about the battle for the forward spots. Engvall being one of probably 3 candidates battling for either a spot on the fourth line or one of the 2 spots in the press box for extra forwards. But what about the blue line? And you look at the depth chart for the New York Islanders right now, and it is kind of open as far as the third pair. And you look at the defense pairings right now. You've got Romanov, you've got D'Angelo, you've got Pelech and Polak. Matthew Schaefer and Isaiah George on the left side, Scott Mayfield, Adam Boqvist, and maybe Ethan Bear on the right side. Now, how do you deal with this? My point is that I don't want Isaiah George to be the 7th defenseman. That doesn't help this team. Isaiah George is still very, very young, still developing at this point in his career. I want him playing every day or close to it. Whether it's at Bridgeport, where he could be one of the top pair defensemen, or whether it's on Long Island where he's more likely to be a third pair defenseman if he makes the team, I do not want him sitting in the press box 4 games out of 5. That happened to Samuel Bolduc. It did not work out very well. It stunted his development. Now, it wasn't the only thing, but it stunted his development. The third pair on the right side, however, to me, is more interesting because you have Mayfield, Boqvist, and Bear probably battling for one spot on the right side. Mayfield has more experience. Statistically, he had a really good season last year, and I know a lot of people have been highly critical of Scott Mayfield, but if you look at the numbers from last year, he wasn't an offensive juggernaut by any stretch, but he was a plus 18. To give you an idea, no other Islander who played half the games or more was better than a plus 5. The only other player in between there was Mathew Barzal, who was a plus 10 in 30 games. So Mayfield, by far, the best plus minus on the Islanders. He is not giving you a lot of offense. He does give you some physicality, which this team needs on the blue line. He gives you experience. But here's the thing. Adam Boqvist fits what Patrick Waugh says he wants in a defenseman more than Scott Mayfield. Boqvist is faster. He moves the puck better. It seems like Waugh likes those smaller, quicker defensemen who can transition better from defense to offense. I can see Mayfield and Boqvist kind of splitting that third pair defense spot because some games you're going to want a guy who's bigger and more physical in the lineup. Some games, depending on the opponent and the matchups, you may want somebody who is smaller and quicker. It also will depend on who's healthy, and we know, everydayers know, how much the Islanders' blue line last year dealt with injuries. That's why they added Tony DeAngelo and Adam Boqvist, because you're not going to go through a season with everybody healthy. It just doesn't happen. And especially right now, Adam Pelech, Ryan Pollock, those guys tend to miss games on a consistent basis because of their age, because of the physical style that they play. Pollock only missed 8 games, but Pelech missed 22 last year. So you're going to need both of them at some point over the course of the season. And I have less of a problem with Mayfield or Boqvist being in the press box for half the games or whatever. Again, as much as Mayfield has been a steady and solid contributor to the New York Islanders, that 7-year contract with the no-trade clause that was handed out to him made very little sense. And it leaves the Islanders kind of stuck right now as far as if they want to move Mayfield to get more depth at another position, to free up some cap space, whatever. That is still up in the air. The wild card, for lack of a better way to put it, in all of this may very well be Ethan Bear. And Bear, I think, gives you experience, but, here's a guy who has played 275 NHL games, was in the NHL as recently as 2023, 2024, played more than half the games for 5 straight seasons, before that, with Edmonton, with Carolina, with Vancouver. So he's capable of playing in the NHL. I think, Ethan Bear could be the perfect seventh defenseman if he had to sit in the press box. Because here's a guy who's 28 years old, and he is what he is. He's a useful sixth or seventh defenseman. You don't mind having him sit in the press box every day as a spare part who could step up and do something. And a right shot defenseman always has value. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins out. I think you'll see a combination of Mayfield and Boqvist on that third pair, depending on the opponent. That's what I would do if I were Patrick Waugh. I also think injuries will play a role in determining how this all plays out, because unfortunately, they are a fact of life in the NHL, especially for the New York Islanders, but we'll see how it all plays out. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. We've got our Islanders birthday of the day, an offensive defenseman who started with the Rangers, but won some Stanley Cups with the Islanders, and an old friend who was once one of the Islanders' top prospects, maybe coming back to North America. We'll talk about the impact of that and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes and see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL, monarchmoney.com. Check it out today. So, back in the news, Ruslan Ishkakov. And look, never really got a lot of a chance with the New York Islanders. Was considered one of their top prospects, and yet played a grand total of one game with the Islanders in the regular season in 2023-2024 and one game with the Islanders in the playoffs. His size, or lack thereof, at 5'7", 152, was a concern. Former second-round pick of the Islanders in 2018. Spent last year with CSKA Moscow in the KHL. Scored only 12 goals and 29 points in 60 games. Now, he signed a 2-year deal there. And he spoke with Match TV and indicated that after this year, when his KHL deal is up, he wants to make another go at it in the NHL. Now, he's been traded from CSKA Moscow to Metallurg Magnitogorsk. I hope I even came close to pronouncing that right. But that hasn't changed his plans at all. And look, we all know, based on video that we've seen, and if you've watched Bridgeport, we know what he's capable of doing. He's been fairly consistent in the AHL. He's amazing when it comes to shootouts, and he puts up some highlight reel plays. Had 51 points in 69 games with Bridgeport in 2022-23. 50 points in 69 games in 2023-2024. He's clearly a good offensive player in the AHL. Whether or not he could do it in the NHL remains to be seen. Here's the bottom line. The Islanders have his NHL rights until he turns 27. That will be in July of 2027. So if he wants to come back to the NHL next year, the Islanders would retain his rights, and we have to see whether Mathew Barzal would want to sign him to a contract or use him as trade bait. And if they sign him, does he play in the NHL? Does he play in the AHL? What is the best place for him? And, if you've got Maxim Shabanov, another small offensive-minded Russian player, don't know if you need both, but you know what? There's no guarantee Shabanov works out in the NHL. There's no guarantee that Iskhakov works out in the NHL. Nothing wrong with inviting both of them to training camp next year and seeing which one of them earns a spot on the roster, if any of them, because all of a sudden, in a year, you probably have Danny Nelson. You probably have Cole Yzerman. These will be guys who are probably NHL ready or very close to it in a year. But the good news is if Iskhakov comes back, more competition, more accountability, more depth in the organization. And even if you trade Iskhakov for a draft pick, for a prospect or another player, these are assets that the Islanders and Mathew Barzal can put to good use. So it seems to me good news that Iskhakov is coming back in a year, or at least plans to do that. And now it's up to the Islanders to give him an opportunity or to send him somewhere else where he might have a better chance. But don't write off Ruslan Ishkakov just yet from the New York Islanders. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And Sunday was the 69th birthday of former Islanders defenseman Mike McEwen. The Hornpain, Ontario native, 6'1", 195 pounds, a draft pick of the Rangers in the third round in 1976, also taken by the Toronto Toros of the WHA. Went right to the NHL, scored 14 goals and 43 points as a rookie in 76-77. Got traded to the Colorado Rockies in the deal that brought Barry Beck to the Rangers. And then in the 80-81 season, joined the Islanders in the deal that sent Chico Resch to Colorado. Had 14 points, 6 goals, 8 assists in 17 playoff games with the Islanders Cup-winning team in 81. And was with the Islanders again in 82 and 83 when they won more Stanley Cups. Had 49 points in 81-82 with the Islanders. Later was dealt to the LA Kings, played for the Capitals, the Red Wings, briefly back with the Rangers, and finished his NHL career in Hartford with the Whalers before finishing up in Sweden. Hung up his skates after one more year in New Haven of the AHL back in 1991-92. McEwen, a good offensive defenseman, could play on the power play, played in 716 career NHL games, 108 goals, 404 points, 460 penalty minutes, won 3 cups with the Islanders, 12 goals, 48 points in 78 playoff games. One of his better games with the Islanders, you may not remember this, but April 13th, 1982, Game 5 of the Patrick Division semifinal series against the Pittsburgh Penguins. A famous game. Everyone remembers John Tonelli tying the game with 2 minutes and 21 seconds left in regulation and then winning the game a little more than 6 minutes into overtime. But people forget what a role Mike McEwen played in this game. McEwen set up the very first goal of the game midway through the second period with Bob Bourne, setting up Bob Nystrom to make it 1-0 Islanders. The Penguins led 3-1 in the third. Islanders go to the power play with Randy Carlyle in the box for hooking, and our Islanders' birthday of the day, Mike McEwen, scores. Mike Bossy and Brian Trottier the assists. That makes it 3-2 Pittsburgh. Tonelli ties it a little more than 3 minutes later, and the game goes to overtime. In overtime, we know Tonelli gets the game winner, but the assists went to Bob Nystrom and our Islanders' birthday of the day, Mike McEwen. McEwen in this game had a goal and 2 assists. He was a +1. He had 7 shots on goal, which tied him with Mike Bossy and John Tonelli for the lead. Islanders outshot the Penguins 47-21, but Michel Dion was very, very good for Pittsburgh, kept them in that game. But Mike McEwen, a very good second pair offensive defenseman who helped on the power play and gave the Islanders some production behind Dennis Potvin. He is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no off season. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you'll love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we take our mailbag questions, and we'll do that once a week here during the off season. So send those questions in. You could follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. You could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. It's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you anytime. We will be back on Wednesday with the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And, of course, let's go Islanders.